Hey guys, happy AMA Friday. It is our fourth AMA Friday. I'm sorry about missing last week, but tons of stuff happened. I'm back though, here to answer your questions. So our first question, actually I dropped the ball on this. I don't know who this is from. I wrote your question down a couple weeks ago and meant to answer it last week, and now I cannot find your message. So after you hear the question, if this was you, please hit me up. Please let me know. I want to send you your coupon code for 25% off a reading. I can't find who asked me this. But the question that I got that I had written down is that some beautiful soul wrote into me and wanted to know about the connection in your chart between your throat center and your self center. So we know that not everybody has those channels completed, but this person did in their chart, and they wanted to know what that specifically meant, if there was any sort of significance to having your throat center and your self center connected in your human design. So we'll talk about that first.
Question 1, my throat center is connected to my self/identity center. How does this impact my human design? So because I can't actually see your chart, I'm going to speak about this super generally. There are actually 3 different channels that potentially could connect your throat to your self center. There's the channel of inspiration, which connects gate 8 in the throat to gate 1 in the self center. There's the channel of the alpha, which connects gate 31 in the throat to gate 7 in the self center. And then there's the channel of the prodigal, which connects gate 33 in the throat to gate 13 in the self center. And we're going to actually use Andy Warhol as an example for this, because Andy has like a ton of stuff going on in his chart. He has like such an active throat self connection. And it's funny because you can actually like thinking about how Andy Warhol he was as a person, it's really clear to see how this like showed up in his life, because the channels that connect ourself to our throat literally give voice and expression to who we are, what we value, and where we're headed in life. And actually how they play out in our lives is impacted by, again, which combination we uniquely have that are activated, if any. And then obviously with the weird sandwich metaphor, remember it's whether it's in our conscious or unconscious design, what planets those gates are hanging out with, and what lines of the hexagram they're hanging out on. So like all of those factors together kind of determine how we give voice and expression to who we are in the world. But before we get too far, let's actually talk about what a channel is. So channels themselves, again, those are those pathways that connect different centers together, and they can either be open and activated in our chart, so there's energy flowing freely between them, or you can have like a hanging gate where only one half of that channel is activated, right? So think of it like a dark hallway, right? Like a channel like being a dark hallway. And there's a gate at each end, and the gate's like a door. So when both of those doors are open, the hallway completely floods with light. It's completely illuminated. We can walk from one end to the other. And so when we have a channel that's like that, energy is flowing freely from one center to the other. And so it's getting the flavor of the gate at each end. So they're like kind of going through the door at each end, plus it's flowing freely back and forth between those centers. But if only one door in our metaphorical hallway is open, that hallway isn't completely lit up, right? Like the light can only go so far. So same with our channels. If only one of those gates are open and switched on, the energy can't go all the way into that other center. Like it kind of runs out of gas because there's nothing coming at it from the other side. So when only one gate's activated, we only carry the energy of that half of the channel within our body, and we actually call people into our lives that complete that channel for us. So in Andy Warhol's case, he has 2 channels already connected, but his third, for the channel of the prodigal, he only has gate 13 activated. So my gut says he either reincarnated with someone in his soul group that had gate 33 activated to kind of complete that channel for him, or someone in the factory or multiple people in the factory probably did, and that empowered him to literally have all 3 channels between his self and his throat connected. So he literally lived his life as the most like fully expressed version of himself possible. Let's take a minute and look at each one of these channels individually. So the first one is the channel of inspiration, and it links the throat center through gate 8, which is all about knowing whether you can make a contribution or not. Like, do you have something to share or you don't? And it's all about unique self-expression. And it connects down to the self center, which is through gate 1, which is about like living in the present and being in your body and having that capacity for creativity and creative energy. And so people who have the channel of inspiration, the first people that I thought of the first time I read about this channel, I literally immediately thought Andy Warhol and Bjork must have this in their chart. And like that's kind of one of the pings that let me know that like, yeah, I should be reading human design for other people, because when I researched their charts, they both absolutely did. So I'm getting a little psychic in terms of like guessing things that are in people's charts. But anyway, thoroughly researched. Anyway, what the channel of inspiration is actually about, it's like literally living your life as a creative expression of the essence of your being. Think about Andy Warhol. He it's not performative. It wasn't an act for him. Like, he just like didn't know any way other than who exactly he was. Like the turtlenecks, the wig, the powdering the face, the like, you know, the gestures, his way he moved, his art, like everything was very, like, as we say now, on brand. It was just so kind of aligned with how he saw the world, how he felt his place in it, and how he expressed himself kind of in that place. So the way he walked, he moved, he just was a fully in his body kind of embodiment, if you will, I know I keep saying the word body, of his creativity, of his point of view, of his perspective. So it really elevates this idea of living as who you are to an art form. And it's almost to the point where, like, anything that you create, or even just through being you, your auric presence actually becomes an experience for other people. Like, you inspire other people to live more authentically as themselves through you just being yourself. So if you have this channel of inspiration, like, activating your chart, I'm not saying go buy a swan dress and like rock it out on the next red carpet. Although Bjork didn't do that for attention, she did that because that's who she is, and that's how she sees herself, and that's how she chooses to walk through the world. It's literally about, you need to kind of really be in connection to, you know, the self-centered questions of like, who am I? Like, what's my direction? Is this within my integrity? And like, you can feel free to creatively express yourself as literally who you are, and just like give that voice and expression, and hold space for that in the world. And you actually attract the attention of other people by being you. In fact, you're actually built to attract the attention of the public. It's like a public outlet for your creativity and leadership. So again, like, it's not about creating an image of who you want people to think you are. The energy of this channel is literally empowers you to live life as yourself and live it out loud in the most colorful, creative, authentic way possible. So the second channel in that connects the throat to the self potentially is the channel of the alpha. And this has a very different flavor than the channel of inspiration, because it's all about leadership. I always call this like the gate, instead of the channel of the alpha, it's almost like the gate of the elected leader. Because gate 31 in the throat center is all about that capacity to lead and influence and guide other people. And then it connects to gate 7 in the self, which is all about direction. Because remember, the people who have their self-center defined typically have a really strong sense of themselves and who they are, their place in the world, and where they're going. And so people who have this center connected literally almost become the person in their tribe who's able to lead and manifest on behalf of their tribe, their community, their family, their friend group, their, you know, coworkers. So they have to earn the trust of the collective first, the trust of their tribe first. And it's not leading from a place of ego. It's not like, this is where I think we're going to the way we need to go, or like my way or the highway. It's not like that at all. It's more of being in touch with the needs of the people around you, really understanding like what patterns or challenges have affected people, but also having that ability to kind of see the way forward and be able to give voice to that, and kind of call it into the physical plane. So this kind of channel of the alpha, it's an elected leader. It's got to be someone who everyone kind of sees, like, you're the unique person who can get us from point A to point B on our behalf, who's going to help us go where we need to go. So the last of these channels is the channel of the prodigal, and it links the throat center, which is all about sharing lessons from the past and sharing memories through gate 33, to the self center, gate 13, which is all about looking forward by also remembering what's happened in the past, like projecting where we're going moving forward by where we've been. And this person who has this channel defined in their chart, it's all about reflection and remembrance. And there's always this like push and pull between being in the moment and having these experiences, and then also having the wisdom to take a step back after and reflect and be introspective and think about what it means in the broader context, so that you can again later on share those stories with other people, so that we all kind of as a species can evolve and move forward. Here's kind of a silly example of this. Think about college football. I always love when I watch on game day, and like the players, obviously they're there, they're in the game. I went to Penn State. It's a big football college. So like when we're watching the game, obviously the players are there, they're in the game, they're on the field, they're doing their thing. But afterwards, sometimes in like the post game where you show the coach or you show the players like footage from the game, that's when they have that hindsight and they can reflect back on, yeah, I shouldn't have passed it to that guy, or oh, I wish I had known known like the other guy was open, or I would have, not ran that play, because hindsight's 20/20, right? So it's kind of like that. It's almost like having the ability to be present and be in the moment and have the experience, but then almost going back to the replay later on, reflecting back and seeing like what worked, what didn't. And then the people who have this channel, the prodigal, are meant to kind of almost carry and collect those experiences so that they can share them with others later on, so that we all grow and we all evolve, and we all don't need to be kind of going through that trial and error process of making mistakes and learning from it. So the prodigal kind of carries their stories and the stories of others so that we can all collectively journey and evolve as a people. So one of the things I always say to people when they have this channel, the prodigal, in their chart, the mind center always wants to do the analysis like immediately. As soon as something inspiring comes in through the head center, or if you have your head defined, like as soon as you get like inspiration kind of triggers, the mind center immediately wants to solve the problem and get on board. And so the challenge for people with this channel, the prodigal, is they're meant to have these experiences and then reflect back later on what they mean. So you want to hold space for actually enjoying the journey and having the experience, and not trying to immediately jump to like, what does it mean? Why are I here? Why am I here? What am I learning from this? Like, just trust you'll be able to figure it out later. So again, there's 3 different potential channels you've got here. You could even have half of these channels. Maybe you've got some of these gates hanging that you're waiting for someone else to come along and complete the channel. But I want to remind everyone of the weird sandwich metaphor, because we don't stop there and say, those are what those channels mean, I'm done, that's how I interpret my chart. Like, not at all. So there's other factors that go into this. So let's look at Andy Warhol's, again, channel of inspiration. So you want to look at first, again, what the gates mean or what the channel means. So we've already talked about what the channel of inspiration is. Then we're going to look at whether it falls in his conscious or unconscious design. And we look and we see that gate 8 for him is in his conscious personality, and gate 1 is in his unconscious design. So that's going to add a layer of meaning to how aware Andy is or was of how this like played out in his life. Then you've also got the planets themselves, the planetary influence. And so I'm noticing that gate 8 is living in his Mars, which is all about conflict, right? So that's going to add another layer to how this gets interpreted and how this gets like, comes out in his life. And his gate 1 is in his Earth, right? So that's part of what grounds him and balances in his life. So those two add flavors to how how that played out in his life as well. And then we look at what lines they are in the hexagram. So for Andy, his gate 1 is on line 4, which is all about our interpersonal relationships with other people. And think about how this factory, that totally makes sense with all the other artists that he called in. He couldn't do his art and give voice to who he was by himself. He needed to be elevated and collaborating with other people. And again, we look at gate 1, at the other end of that chart, it's on line 3, which is all about trial and error. He probably took a while to figure out who he was and how to give expression to his unique path in the world. So again, you have to look at all of those different aspects, whether it's in your conscious or unconscious design, your planetary influence, the line of the hexagram, plus on top of that, what the individual gates in the channel mean. And all of that together will let you know how you give expression to who you are through your throat in your own chart.
Our second question comes from Tess. Tess wrote in about fear. She had heard through her own self-study of her own human design as she was hacking her chart that there was a place she could go in her chart specifically that would let her know what some common fears she had are and how they would kind of play out in her life. So I'm here to answer that for you, Tess. I can tell you exactly where to look in your chart to figure out what your recurring fears are going to be and the lessons you're going to learn through those fears. So let's dig in.
Let's talk about fear. Where can I look in my human design chart to determine where my fears are? So in our charts, we know that gates can either be gifts or they can be lessons. And our body knows that in order for us to like truly learn a lesson, we have to get out of our comfort zone. We got to get uncomfortable, get nervous, and anxiety and fear. Those are all fantastic tools that our body uses to teach us those lessons. So there's only specific centers that actually contain fear gates, and that's the mind center, the spleen, and the emotional solar plexus. So we're going to use Beyonce as our guide as we kind of, step into the language of fear, because it's kind of comforting to know that even Beyonce has things she's afraid of as well. And she has lessons she's here to learn through her fears. So to get a sense of what fear gates you have in your chart, there's a couple of different places you could look. You could pull up the chart properties and scroll down, and there's actually a list of all the gates you have activated in your chart, but it doesn't necessarily distinguish which are fear gates and which aren't. So the easier way to do that is to actually zoom in on either your spleen, your solar plexus, or your mind and look for the gates that are circled, right? And have half of that channel filled in, like what I showed you on the screen. Those are your fear gates, and those are the ones that are pertinent to you in your chart. If it's not circled and that channel is left blank, or even half of that channel is left blank, it's not something that applies to you. So we're going to get really deep into each one of these fear gates and how they kind of impact us in our lives. And so this might be a great time to pause, grab a beverage, grab your chart, maybe some paper and a pencil, and then meet me back here, and we're going to go through each gate one by one. I hope you're back and you're refreshed. Maybe you used the restroom. Maybe you got your life in order, your desk in order a little bit, or maybe not. Maybe you got a beverage. Okay, anyway, we're going to go through our fear gates one by one. So we're going to start with the mind center. So there's several different gates in the mind center. All teach us a different lesson around fear, or using fear rather. So gate 47 is all about the fear of futility. It's this push to kind of make sense of things that are confusing, and this like almost anxiety around not being able to find an answer. And that works really well with gate 24, which is a kind of very similar flavor. It's a fear of ignorance. It's this anxiety that you're not going to be able to figure something out and not be able to find the answer. Gate 4 is a fear of chaos. It's an anxiety that your life's always going to be in chaos and you won't be able to bring order to things. Beyonce has gate 11, which is a fear of darkness. And this is kind of funny considering how successful she is. It's an anxiety around sharing and manifesting your ideas. So it's probably something that's held her back in a good way. It's kept her from like taking risks that weren't right for her, or like trying to call things into existence that weren't, in alignment with her authenticity. So there's got to be that healthy kind of balance so we don't like, act on every single impulse that we have. Think of how successful she's been. So she's learned a great lesson through this fear of darkness. Gate 43 is a fear of rejection. It's this anxiety that like your ideas are too weird or they're too niche, and it's kind of like, I don't want my ideas to be rejected. I don't want to be challenged, or people to think I'm bizarre. So it's that anxiety about like sharing kind of what you think with the world. And then the last gate that's a potential fear gate in the mind center is this fear of challenge. It's because remember, the mind center constantly wants to be like making meaning and solving problems. And so it's a fear that like, if you share your opinion, it's going to be challenged. And so a lot of people who have this fear gate activated, like need to find evidence, need to find case studies, need to find background. And then even then they still feel kind of an anxiety around sharing the conclusions that they've come to because they don't want to be challenged. It's like a conflict thing. And so again, whatever planet these gates land in, what line of the hexagram they're on, and whether it's in your conscious or unconscious design is going to give you insight into how this is going to play out in your life. So the spleen also has some fear gates, and these all, again, have to do with your awareness. Remember, the spleen is the oldest awareness center in the body. The way I always explain it to my clients is like back when we were evolving from fish with legs who were like breathing air for the first time as we like crawled out of the water into the muck, we needed a center in our body that would tell us like what was going to eat us and kill us and what was actually our food. And that was what the spleen did. And so now, because our lives are not hopefully in imminent danger all the time, I hope that, I wish that for you, that our spleen has kind of now become like a problem solver. It's looking for problems that need to be fixed or patterns that can be adjusted, and it can get a little nitpicky and anxious in that way as well. So a lot of anxiety lives in the spleen. So gate 48 is this fear of inadequacy. It's a fear that you don't have enough depth, that people are going to think you're shallow or not like deep enough. Gate 57, and Beyonce actually has that in her chart. Anything with a little pink star, that's Beyonce's got that fear. She has like 4 gates activated in her spleen that are all fear gates. So gate 57, fear of the future. It's this anxiety of like, what's the future going to bring? Because like, obviously we don't know. We can only control what our actions are. And then there's that element of fate and, of choice, and then, consequence. We've got gate 44, which is the fear of the past. And that's kind of the inverse of that fear of the future. It's almost like a fear that a past patterns or past baggage is going to catch up with you and impact you today. Some people have gate 50, which is a fear of responsibility. It's almost like I'm afraid of being the one that's in charge or taking on too much responsibility, or even sometimes a fear of not taking on enough responsibility and not stepping up enough. So it's like navigating what level of responsibility feels good. Beyonce also has gate 32, which is a fear of failure. And again, she's so successful. So it's kind of almost like refreshing to know that like this is even something Beyonce thinks about. Like if I, put myself out there in this way, how is it going to be accepted? So it's a fear of failure that sometimes can hold people back from doing what they really want to do. And so how we navigate that fear and step into our authenticity can be like a pattern in our life. There's gate 28, which is a fear of death. And it's almost like the risk taker's gate, right? Like it's a fear that like, if I'm not taking risks, then I'm not living. And so, but it can also kind of be inverted. Like it's almost like fear of not taking risks. Like if I'm not taking risks, am I really living? Or it's a fear of if I take too many risks, is that like going to jeopardize, how my life works out. So it's kind of navigating risk taking. Then there's also gate 18, and Beyonce has this as well. It's the fear of authority, and it's this fear of being judged by others, and sometimes it also reflects or manifests itself as like self-judgment, being almost too like critical of ourselves because we're anticipating how other people might view us as well. So Beyonce does not have any gates in her emotional solar plexus activated, but there are, gates and fears, that live in these gates as well. So gate 37 is a fear of tradition. And I see this a lot with people who are entrepreneurs, who are kind of striking out in, not striking out like, doing poorly, but like striking out and blazing their own path, right? And are taking like non-traditional pathways in life. Like they're not typically the 2.5 children, white picket fence, dog, marriage. And so this can be a fear of tradition, like a nervousness that like, a nervousness either about taking on traditional roles or even a nervousness about like, will I be accepted if I live my truth and take on a non-traditional role? So gate 6 is a fear of intimacy, and it comes with people a lot of times with emotional solar plexus authority, and it's this like pulse of like expanding and contracting where like you're either like you're afraid of showing who you really are and having that kind of emotional and sexual intimacy with somebody and really like sharing with them all of you. Gate 49 is a fear of nature, and it's more of a nervousness about rejection and about consequences of actions. So like sometimes it can almost paralyze people into inaction. They're so nervous about like either taking action and being rejected emotionally or taking action, there being like consequences for actually doing something that they actually get paralyzed and don't do anything at all. So that's a gate to overcome. There's a fear of silence for gate 22. It's a nervousness of that like, is anyone actually listening to me? Like, am I shouting into the void? Am I being heard? Or it's this nervousness that like, does any of this matter? Is there anything actually worthwhile listening to? Gate 55 is a fear of emptiness. It's like a nervousness about not knowing what to be passionate about. Like a lot of times, it's this nervousness of like, if I don't have something that I'm like completely obsessed with or focused on or like super, super passionate about, then my life has no meaning. And so people with that fear have to kind of navigate that. Gate 36 is a fear of inadequacy. And this is more about sexual and emotional adequacy. Like, am I going to be enough for my partner? Am I good enough for them? Am I giving them what they need? As opposed to like, are my needs being addressed as well? So it's almost like super hyper focused on this other and like having this fear of like being enough. Am I enough? Which I think, is super common. And gate 30, this fear of the fates. It's a nervousness about like what might or might not happen. And again, sometimes this can paralyze people into inaction as well. Like they're just so worried about all the different consequences that they just don't take action. So when you're going through the fear gates in your own specific chart, and in You by Design, there's going to be a cheat sheet that I'm developing right now that'll be up in a couple weeks that'll walk you through what every single one of your gates means, not just your fear gates. And but when you're interpreting your gates, again, you got to use the weird sandwich metaphor, except you only have one gate to focus on. So it's more like weird bruschetta. And I know that's not the way bruschetta works. Like hopefully you're not putting like, well, maybe you are. I don't know. Maybe you're super creative in the kitchen. I'm not. I'm a nightmare in the kitchen. But anyway, so when you're looking at the gate, you have to do the stacking of all the toppings, right? You've got to think about what the gate itself means, whether it's in your conscious personality or your unconscious design. If it's in your conscious personality, you're probably going to understand right away how it plays out in your life because it's such a day-to-day part of you. But if it's in your unconscious design, you might need to sit down with a trusted friend, a partner, a family member, and have them talk you through where they might see it. Because sometimes things in our unconscious design, they're so innate that we need someone else to kind of point it out to us and show us. Or we need to do, or maybe that doesn't make you comfortable. Do some self-reflection, journal, think back, maybe do some meditation. Let it kind of, ask your guides if that's something you're into. Ask like kind of the universe before you go to sleep, like, hey, can you show me where this lives in my life, where this, fear is kind of playing itself out to get some insight. Anyway, so we have the gate itself. You've got your conscious versus unconscious design. You've got the planetary influence too. So remember, every single gate has a planet that it chills out with, right? So that's going to let you know where it's going to surface in your life if it's not immediately apparent. And then finally, it's also the line of the hexagram that it lives on. And again, remember, each line of that hexagram has a different vibe and energy and way of walking through the world. And so it's all of those things together, the gate, the design or personality, the planetary influence in the line, that really is going to show you how this fear is going to play out in your specific life.
So that's it. Thank you so much for stopping by for AMA Friday. Please send me your questions. So projectors, consider this your invitation. Generators, manifesting generators, I need your questions. Respond to me. Reflectors, you have special dispensation to skip the 28-day waiting period and just send me your questions. And manifestors, you probably already sent them to me, so I'm not worried about it. But please let me know what you want to know. And you could be featured on next week's AMA Friday. And if you are, you will get a coupon specially customized for you that gets you 25% off a reading with me. And for the rest of you for sticking around, I'm going to flash up that coupon code AMA Friday, which gets you 20% off a one-on-one reading with me. They're literally the best part of my day, so please start filling up my calendar. Also, before I forget, You by Design launches next week, but this is the free preview weekend. This is me dancing. Like, yeah, get it. It's been a while since I've been on a dance team. Anyway, I'm out of class. Can you tell I've got the 90s finger pointing thing going on? Okay, let's stop dancing. So next week it launches, but this weekend is the free preview weekend. I can't wait for you to see what I've been working on. I'm in the middle of a couple really fantastic collaborations, which I can't tell you about yet, but I'm so excited to. So I'm calling in experts to give you the tools that you've been asking for. What happens next? Now that I know my design, how do I live by it? How do I live my most authentic, grounded, magnetic life? And I've got some great experts who are going to help you, plus a podcast, videos, downloadables, journal pages. I'm so excited for you guys to check it out this weekend. Give me your feedback. Let me know what resources you want to exist. And every week, it's just going to keep growing and adding more. So again, thank you so much, and I will see you back here next week. Have a great weekend.